All right. We're in. We're piped in. Uh, Here we go. How's it going, sir? How you doing?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I've had this like cough lingering for the last like 2 weeks or so, which is stunk.
Uh,
But yeah, other than that, pretty good. Had
I had a new book released just a couple of days ago, so I'm feeling pretty good.
ooh, all right. Well, you got to tell us a little bit about that. You can't just leave that hanging.
Well, it's the final hit. I have the fantasy series, The Blood Witch,
Hmm.
and it's a 5 book series. And most of the time people will publicize when I got book one done or book two done, and I don't want to really publicize until everything's all done. Just little bits here and there. And so I've got four of the five done. There's three history books, the main book, and then the epilogue book, which I'm finishing now. But this was one of the last of the history books just before the main story takes on. And yeah, I read it again for the second or third time, and I'm like, shit, our editing was all done. I thought it was the weakest of my books, and I'm going, there's nothing weak about this book. And I'm going to pat myself on the back because it was a pretty dang good book.
All right.
But it did get released, so that's Ellie. Blood Witch History, Ellie.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, great. Well, congrats. It's always great when you always when you're writing your story, writing your book, writing your script, what have you, and you're like, okay, I think this might be a little weak, and then once you finish it and you kind of go back and read it in its context and in its continuity, and you're like, oh wait, no, this I actually achieved what I was supposed to do. That's pretty that type of
Right,
feeling is
right.
great.
Well, I think it was just I was worried about the characters, whether they were strong or not, and then going through it again and again. I go, wait, these characters, they tell their own story, so okay, they have their own voice. Because if a character, you know this, if a character has their own voice, not just what the author gives them,
Hmm.
but when a reader reads it and they could see that this person actually has their own voice, you're not reading somebody's character, but they're speaking to you, then you know that that character's done well. And I got a bunch of them in the book, and yeah, it's all right.
Oh man, the distinct character voice is my favorite thing, especially because it helps you increase the flow of reading and processing the story because you don't
Mhm.
always have to kind of recheck yourself as to which character is this speaking to because their voice is so well defined and distinct. You just instantly recognize who's talking when. I especially love that in novels because they don't always tell you which character is speaking sometimes. Sometimes you get into a long conversation where you just got, a new paragraph line for every thing of dialogue. And if it's between two people, a little easier to do. But every once in a while, I'll read a book that has it between three or four, and you're like, oh my God, who the heck is speaking right now? And then other stories where you're like, I know exactly what's going on here. This is a heated conversation. I love it.
Well, either way, that's my life. So,
Well, that's a pretty awesome accomplishment. So glad to have you here for that. Thank you for sharing your latest book of Blood Witch History of Ellie coming out.
yep.
That's awesome. Um, we've got an interesting script this week, and but before we get to it, we'll just start with the typical show intro. Let's see how if I can get through this without coughing or hacking up a lung. Welcome to Scripts on Saturdays, the only screenplay review show on the interwebs discussing scripts both professional and amateur circulating around Hollywood, giving you, the TV and movie-going audience, a behind-the-scenes and inside track on what writers are pushing and what producers are buying. I am your host, the Script Doctor, and joining me this week again is returning champion, a Dag of a Dag Outlaw. So happy to have you here for this one. For a couple of reasons. One, you do have some fascinating thoughts about American history. And
Yeah.
and two, you and I were both a little scratching our heads at some point, some parts of the script. So,
Oh, you know what? The frustration sometimes is fun. And when you step away from it and go, you know what, that was horrible, and you step back and go, no, actually, this is pretty cool. And the more we're talking about this, because we were, sharing a few thoughts beforehand, I'm thinking, I'm gonna look back at this and think, you know what, this is actually a really fun episode to do, regardless feel about the story or the author or anything else. I'm having fun, believe it or not. Kicking myself in the butt, but yeah, I'm having fun.
well, let's talk a little bit about that. So, this week's script is called Vicky. It placed number 58 on the 2024 blacklist with 11 votes, and is written by Allesandra Clark, who does have a few screenwriting credits, not many, but a few, mostly for Netflix things that a lot of people sadly have not. Well, I don't know if it's sadly or not, but most people haven't read or watched before, which tends to be the case when you have an oversaturation of content through the streaming services. But Adega, please share with the wonderful audience out there the log line for Vicky.
You got it. The incredible true story of Victoria Woodhull's improbable run to become the first female president of the United States 50 years before women even had the right to vote.
That's right. The synopsis for Vicky the synopsis for Vicky is as follows: the story of a fearless woman born in chaos who rises from a tumultuous childhood to become Wall Street's first female broker, address Congress, and run for U.S. president in 1872. Despite scandal and societal scorn, her bold journey with Sister Tennessee captivates a young reporter, promising a tale of intrigue and defiance. So, yes, this is a biopic, one of the few biopics that we do on the show, and it's kind of.
I'm gonna blame you then, because you said biopic when you sent the note to me, I think, as well. And thinking a biopic, it limited my vision as to what this actually could be.
Yes. I mean, one of the things that made me like, aside from the fact that we had a lot more scripts on this year's blacklist than normally, I always like to spice it up, because I like to see, well, what's going on in the biopic area, because biopics are frequent. They're usually pretty popular, especially in list sections of the screenwriting world like this. But this year we didn't have that many, and I thought, well, why is that? So why did this one stand out to make the list versus all the others that are circling around? Like, there's biopics of tons of various politicians throughout U.S. history. There's biopics of filmmakers, authors, inventors that are always circulating around, and not many of. I mean, some are really good, and most of them are really kind of whatever. And I was just telling you before the show, when it comes to like biopics, whether it's a feature film or a Netflix series or something, you'd be lucky if you get 30% accuracy, because when you're telling a story about a person's life, you have to skip a lot of dead space, so to speak, in order to get to the pivotal points of their life, in order to make an interesting narrative. So you have to compress time. You got to exercise some liberty with some of the historical facts or the players in order to make the story work. And in some cases that can be beneficial to the entertainment aspect of the stories. In other cases, it can be incredibly frustrating to people that are that cherish history. So
right.
So this script here opens up with a quote from Imani Sachs, who's a self-proclaimed biographer. And I'm going to read the quote to you, because this quote was clearly picked as within a level of intention. And from there, and even for the people in the live audience listening in, please share your thoughts on that. From there, this kind of helps us set a little bit of the tone of this script, or this biopic. So the quote is as follows: "I shall try to tell what seems true to me, to revive the personality of Victoria Woodhull, a woman who dared to do anything she wanted to do. Those who lack her strength or her ruthlessness, those whose training or circumstances or deepest desires prevent them from obeying piratical impulses, may release them vicariously in her adventures without doing any harm to anyone. And those who haven't any piratical impulses will find Americana." That's by Emily Sachs, biographer in 1928. I thought this to be a very, very choice quote, given how the rest of the screenplay turns out. Adega, what was some of your thoughts on this little passage presented to us before we got into the meat of the script?
You know what? I read it a couple times, and I didn't have a lot of deep thoughts about it. It just seemed like, well, maybe it's one of those little things that are going to be, at the title screen. it's a little blurb where people think, okay, so this is going to be something about Americana. It's going to be something about Woodhull. But I didn't put a lot of thought into it.
Hmm.
I think part of the thing, and for the audience this week, just to let you know, um, I got onto this script a little late. And normally if I know I'm going to be on the show, I've gone through it a few times. But I got on this a little late. So I mostly wanted to get through it as opposed to, putting a lot of deep thought into certain things. And it may be part of the reasons why I missed the boat on a lot of this stuff as well. But nah, it was just kind of cool. I thought, a nice little quote of somebody that knew somebody and had that in there. But I didn't have any real deep thoughts. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, even for myself, when I first read it, I just kind of took it as like, oh, this okay. So we got this quote here. Maybe this has. I wonder how this influenced the tone of the script. And when I first completed it, I had to sit back and I had a handful of questions for myself, and those questions we'll ask a little bit later into the show. But yeah, when I read it again, I feel like I got the answers. And then because the Toronto National Film Festival has just started on Thursday, I have some colleagues that are up from Los Angeles and Atlanta and the UK that are in town. And I got to hang out with them and discuss a little bit of this script. And they had similar takes, but very things that they highlighted more important than others. And that helped kind of like have me ask additional questions when I went through the script again this afternoon, where I was like, okay, I think there's something I think there's something else going on here. But yeah, so we this story is kind of like it's got like a double narrative flashback sequence to it, if you will. Because we open on Joe Green, who is a journalist for the Herald in 1872 in New York. And there's this really interesting pattern of how the writer describes every single character. And it almost gets into a little bit of a jokiness to it, because it's always the character's name in all caps, their general age, their ethnicity, and then another adjective or defining feature. And it's always in that order. And it started to get a little bit funny, especially as you get further into the script, and there's just this barrage of characters that are just being introduced, and they're all getting the same thing, like quickly, like in and out of the way. And it normally in this case, I would like roll my eyes and think, oh, geez, like we're getting like so many characters. How are we going to keep track of them? But these characters would come and go so quickly that it reminds me that made me suspect that the writer was having fun with the setting, and also with a perspective of what people would assume is going on in the script. Excuse me. Again, I'm coughing.
See, that's something where you were like I mentioned this before we got on, that you were somehow caught on to this where I didn't. And at first, when you told me what was going on, I was kicking myself for not catching it, and now I'm quite amused. But having it written the way it was, and for me not to catch on that it wasn't what I thought it was initially frustrating. And like you said, seeing the names, having the beginning the way it was, that first setting in the church.
Oh, yeah.
And having to chase the kids off, and, the toothlessness, and the really dirtball hillbilly type setting, which really isn't real for the time. I got, instead of looking at it thinking, you know what, this is supposed to be kind of funny. Instead of looking at it that way, I got really analytical, going, wait, was there any communities that did this? I know there was certain types, and I mentioned to you beforehand, like the Shakers and different things where they were perverts.
Mm-hmm.
But it just, I got frustrated right off the jump. And it was because I didn't catch what was going on. And like you were saying with the dictation, or maybe with the little notes of which person, what age, what gender, what color,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, I went the wrong way, and I was thinking this is someone who has a real political agenda, and this was meant to be, pushing some type of overt rudeness towards anyone who wasn't a feminist. And
Yeah.
then things attacked the feminist a little bit here and there, and it really threw me for a loop. I couldn't figure it out. But just to give everyone the heads up, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping the gun, this is actually supposed to be satire, and I didn't catch on. And I told my wife, and I mentioned this to you, about halfway through it, I put it down. I was real frustrated because I was taking it serious. And I said, this person is horrible. This person should never write again. And, well, you know what? I'm kicking myself, but still, it's kind of fun. So,
I
yeah,
mean,
I didn't catch on.
I will say this: like sometimes, an effective satire is one that can almost feel like plausible because of the social atmosphere we have going on around us, right? So,
Right, right.
so sometimes, I mean, this is also one of the things. I know Jonathan Swift talked about. I just can't remember the exact quote, but when he did A Modest Proposal, he was talking about how he was making fun of the current economic strife that was going on in Great Britain at the time, and he proposed a very absurd suggestion, and he was hoping with this satirical essay to kind of shake people out of the current social narrative, so that they could take a step back and actually take a look at what's going on around them and see where the real problems lie. And he remarked how there are a number of people where they get it right away. There's a number of people that it takes them a beat. And then there's the other people that just refuse to see the forest for the trees, so to speak. And
Right.
and this is kind of what he was hoping to get from satires, because you kind of you separate the wheat from the chaff, sort of thing, right? You can see, okay, so these are the people that have critical thinking, and you can see the tier list of like, okay, so there's the ones that get it right away, so which means that they weren't the people that need to be convinced or need to be sort of broken through. They're already aware of the situation. Then you have the other ones that they've been ingesting so much malarkey of sorts around society that when they read this, it takes them a minute, but then they're like, oh, okay, wait, I see what's going on here. This is what this perspective is, this is that perspective they're kind of working to do, either manipulate or shape a narrative around. And, oh, I see what's going on here. Okay, now I can take a step back. I can take a look at the situation, and now I'm in the same, you've sort of, what is the term, knocked the dust off the table or the banister, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the others out there who are like, no, this person is serious. He wants to eat babies. And that is supposed to make, the other people who listen to a person responding that way scratch their head and go, I don't think that's what that person's intention was. And for this script here, but based on the log line, the opening blurb from the biographer, and the first act of this screenplay, I had to double check even with myself to wonder, is this supposed to be like a story of an unsung hero, or is this the story of what other people perceive to be an unsung hero, and this is kind of exploiting, no, they were never a hero, they were a really horrible person, and I'm going to have fun with that. and
I think part of my confusion too, because I see that now. And I think I had mentioned before, I had, before self-publishing, I had other publishers and I had different editors that would work on things that I had to fire, or basically not fire, but I got with the publisher and said, these people are horrible. There is a certain narrative in a lot of the modern books. It's starting, hopefully it's going to die out pretty soon, where the female characters are all that in a bag of chips without any growth period.
mm-hmm.
And I was looking at it in the first instance because, they're this horrible family doing horrible things, outcast. They were basically American gypsies.
Mm-hmm.
And she comes out of that, as I was assuming, we already have an untouchable hero. And she can see the flaws in her family. And I was analyzing it way too seriously. It should have been funny in my mind. But
But we could talk
again,
a little.
I think it.
Yeah.
No, I was thinking, it's my own personal experience that tainted me so much that I couldn't see it. and it should have been hilarious in certain spots.
Yes, I mean, yeah, I completely understand that, but I completely understand your perspective because I know people where they're writers and they. One of the things that's difficult with modern day satire is that a lot of people that get into writing satire don't really spend enough time analyzing the classics of satire to understand how it's done. They look at the same thing the way some people look at sarcasm, where, oh, great sarcasm is so earnest that you can't tell it's sarcasm. It's like, well, no, there's always a hint there, because again, good sarcasm reflects opposite the views of the person technically saying it. And if you are meeting someone for the first time and they're being sarcastic, you as a person can't process that because you don't have a frame of reference for it, right? So you would take it at face value, and that is something a lot of writers have to consider when they're doing a brand new thing and they're trying to establish themselves as a satirist. Is you have to make a very effective opening that conveys that this is a satire without ruining the experience of enjoying a satire itself. And that's a really tricky thing to do, especially for a first-time writer. And some writers try to do that by being as incredibly earnest.
Agree, but it hit me so much because, yeah, but it just hit me so much because it literally was in the notes from one of these editors that the girl was insufficient. She had to have these type of traits.
And
and so I'm watching, I'm watching this play go out throughout the script, and I'm thinking, she got a job working on this script.
Yeah, well, that goes to the other part too, right? Because we have seen a fair amount of material, whether it's short stories, novels, comic books, television shows, short films, feature films, where you're halfway through it and you're thinking to yourself, this person is just full of themselves and they're terrible, but if you and it becomes funny in the worst way possible. It's like, it's funny in the fact that I can't believe someone agreed to put money towards this so that I could get to this stage in the world. But that is also where you have the satire comes in, right? Because the satire is making fun of the fact that, people have put money into this for this big joke, but me as an author or as a writer, I'm intentionally trying to entertain and make you laugh because of this. Whereas we've seen this other variations of media where they're very earnest, they're very serious, they're saying, no, this is what I believe in, this is what I want, this is these are my politics, my thoughts, my takes on various things. And because it's not a tongue-in-cheek aspect, we have a bitter taste towards it, because we realize that there's the concept of entertainment with a revelation of a moral narrative is not there, because the moral narrative supersedes the entertainment. And when you get fed so much of that, you get a bitter taste and hypersensitivity towards someone that is using those same techniques for the purposes of entertainment and not moral driven agenda.
Right.
And
I'm just a little frustrated. I got fooled by it is all.
Right. And there's some hints here, and this is not to make anyone who has read the script, whether it's you, Dega, myself, or anyone else who happened to read it before today's show, make them feel like they have blinders on or anything. But there are a couple of little hints here that even I missed. Like, I didn't get this until the second reading, and it's on the first page, because we have Joe Green, who is one of our characters. He is he hops out of a bar. He steals like an apple off of a vendor cart, and the vendor's like screams "Hey!" and then he catches his footing and nearly gets run over by a horse and carriage driver, and the driver's like "Hey!" screaming at him, and then he bumps into a pedestrian who's like "Hey, what the heck?" and then he throws the apple away, and someone kind of blurts out, "What are you doing?" And it's kind of this rapid fire thing of, this guy's an obnoxious jerk who in his own quest going from one location to another is inconveniencing like 3 other people. And I'm thinking, okay, if this was a satire, that's funny. If this was intentional to showcase that, white man bad, this is arrogant. But then we get into the New York Herald, and then we go, reporters, all of the men. It's like, well, obviously it's 1871. They shout at their secretaries, some of them women. I'm like, wait, that's kind of funny. And then they scribbled down like every word. And we have these quotes. Grant endorsed by Michigan Republicans. Boy in New Jersey meets terrible end. And then Jews persecuted, comma, again with an exclamation point. And I'm thinking, okay, they're playing with the times. They're playing with the attitude here, the absurdity, and also at the same time the desperation that comes with 19th century America. Infrastructure is still being built out at that point. You could literally change your identity from town to town and no one would know. There's a lot of exploitation and a lot of manipulation here. And then we get introduced to one of the editors named Walter Barnes, who is described as 50s white conservative, and he's very skeptical of Joe having this story, and especially when he's like saying it's front page, it has to be on the paper tomorrow, and they're going back and forth. And Walter, the editor is like, suffrage, nobody cares about suffrage. And then he turns to his secretary, who happens to be a woman. He's like, no offense. I'm like, there's the joke. A guy at that point would never say no offense to his secretary. He wouldn't even care of her feelings.
My thing, when you were talking about the guy with the apple and he was, pissing everybody off, and the one person said, what the? Which wasn't a common phrase back then.
Right.
So I automatically started going into, let's analyze everything this guy's doing wrong. Because they went up to the building where the newspaper, the Herald, he went through, and I mentioned this to you before, went through a rotary door. They didn't come out for another decade and a half.
Right.
So it was just, I'm looking at it, and then when they're talking to the secretaries, I'm thinking, instead of listening to the story, I was thinking, what would a newsroom back then be like? How long would it take from writing to print? What type of things did they write on? How many secretaries? Who was in the office? I was getting hyper analytical because I overshot the the narrative of what was going on. I didn't understand it was satire, but now that you're mentioning it, I'm having more fun with it.
Right. And Joe is our journalist who's talking about this break he's had.
Sorry,
he's got
I'm
all this...
in and out.
Oh, that's okay. So he's talking to Walter. He's trying to convince him, like, this is a great story. You're never gonna believe it. And Walter's like, listen, I'm not putting some unknown suffragist on the front page of a newspaper. And Joe, drops a bombshell. He's like, what if I told you she's currently running for president of the United States?
Mm-hmm.
And Walter's like, a woman? Like, they've been talking. Of course he's gonna. Like, yes. Who else have they been talking about for the entire time? Walter. And Joe stands firm. He's like, yes. And then, of course, Walter asks, like, well, that's not allowed, is it? And Joe says, I don't know, but she's doing it. And not just that. And then we jump into the kind of like the background, a quick tertiary background of our main character, Victoria Woodhull, who's early 30s, white. This part made me laugh because after I read the script, I then went to look for a photo of Victoria Woodhull, and she's in the thumbnail here. But the narrator describes her as white, beautiful, tempestuous, a woman who will demand your attention by any means necessary. And you look at all of her photos, and you're like,
Nope.
Even for that time, that's so I'm like, okay, we're playing with some exaggeration here. And then when I read it a second time, I'm like, okay, they're having some real fun here. But we find out from Joe, like, she was the first woman on Wall Street. She was the first woman to address the United States Congress. And then we have these flashes of her posing for photos, kind of emulating men of the career positions that she is sort of embodying. So when she says she's the first woman on Wall Street, we get a flash, and then we have a picture of Victoria where she's lowering her chin like a banker, like a very prominent banker. And then when she says she's addressing Congress, we get another flash, and now she lifts her chin up like a politician, kind of staring into the future. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of funny. And then We get introduced to her sister, Tennessee Claflin, who is also described as like 20s. Again, they also reaffirm white. It's like, well, if it's her sister, clearly it's going to be, the same ethnicity. They say she's fresh-faced, she's buoyant, she's a mop of curly hair, uninhibited and fiercely loyal. She's wearing a dress completely overwhelmed by ruffles. And I'm thinking, yeah, more ruffles equals more prestige. And I could just see her looking like a layer cake of ruffles where you couldn't even make out her figure in a dress on my second reading of this. Just because of what I was able to grasp after the first reading. And so we're getting like a little cliff notes of her entire family, but then we find out, well, how was Victoria conceived? And this
it was a very bad day at church.
It was a very bad day at church. So as these guys are kind of getting to this point, they're talking about, well, what's the headline going to be of this story? And they're going to say, well, it's going to be the prostitute who ran for president. And the reason they're saying this is because, well, Victoria Woodhull hung out with a bunch of prostitutes and used what they were able to overhear to further her own agenda, which is pretty typical of anyone who would do that at that time.
That's common. It's been going on forever.
Yes, I believe there's even a scandal going on to this day about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we go into like rural Ohio in a church in 1838, and it's described as packed with deeply religious people singing a hymn and speaking in tongues, arms stretching towards the Almighty, tears streaming down their faces, bodies writhing with the Spirit of Christ. And in the background behind the pew are Victoria Woodhull's parents going at it hot and mean. And the people in the church, when they realize this is happening, they're of course aghast, and they're demanding that they stop it and that you can't do this. Get the children out of here. And
here's another clue that it was funny, because one of the guys, I think Paul Barras, I don't know exactly how they described him, but he actually covered up the eyes of the statue of Mary,
of the Virgin Mary. Yeah,
I should have known. I should have known.
And then we get introduced to our narrator, who is described as a woman who is sharing this experience, and she says, like, this led her mother to believe that the baby was sent by something divine. So, I mean, I had to say, like, for the first 10 pages on my reread of it, I was like, okay, so this is definitely making fun of this woman. And the history and the context around it at the time. No one is safe, so to speak, which I like those types of stories where no character is safe, no character is lauded or revered in such a way. They all have horrible flaws, and so we kind of just follow through, where we jump a few years later. One of the reasons why Victoria Woodhull is named Victoria, native Mary, maiden name Clafhill, is because her mother loved Queen Victoria, and thought, and her mother would say things to Victoria as a baby, like, one day you will have a seat of power higher than the Queen, or higher than England, and of course, like, even the narrator's like, even Vicky thought that might be a stretch. And it's like, well, Vicky's a baby. So, but it's a little funny here. We also find out that she's like one of 10 children, 8 that survived. A few, sadly passed away due to child mortality. But she's got a younger sister named Tennessee, who's 5 years younger. She has several brothers, but the writer has this little joke where Victoria's father interrupts Victoria and her siblings at school, covered in tar and feathers. and
see, that was another thing too. I'll let you get into that, because
sure.
know what, not personally, of course, but I do know a lot about the tar and feathering. And he wouldn't be showing up to school if he'd just been tarred and feathered. That is painful. It takes a long time to get over, and it takes quite a while to get that stuff up. So him showing up at school, I'm thinking, someone didn't do their homework. But it's satire. So
But it's
all right.
satire. And so after having been recently tarred and feathered, we don't yet know for what, he enters the classroom and he tells his kids, okay, come on, pack up, we're going. And of course, Victoria's like, I don't want to go. I want to keep learning school here, because we are told through narration that she's got a quick wit about her. She has a keen eye. You don't want to get into an argument with her because she'll find a way to humiliate you. And of course, the father is chasing her around the classroom, trying to tell her, like, we have to get going now. Eventually, all the kids leave the classroom, and we find that her entire family is on the run from the rest of the town that's chasing them down. And the reason being is because her father is a snake oil salesman who has been exposed, and now him and his family can't stay in the town because they're going to, like, tar and feather or lynch them or something. So they're running away, and as they're running away, we see the brothers that Victoria has. And the narrator says, yes, there's several other children and brothers, but they're not really important right now, so we're just going to get rid of them. And then they just magically pop out of existence, and it's only like the five girls and the mother and father running for their lives out of town. So I was kind of like having a nice little snickering of laughter while we're getting in here, and I also liked a little bit of how there's some more contemporary vulgarity to it as well. So they're not trying to make this a legitimate period piece with some highfalutin dialogue. They're trying to make it a lot more rugged, a little bit more contemporary, and a little bit more kind of fueled with some real emotion, so that it couldn't be mistaken as trying to be an authentic period piece with, like, Ian Goff or something. Just
no, I totally missed the boat, but gosh, I'm finding, you know what? I probably would have missed Mel Gibson, or not Mel Gibson, Mel Brooks stuff. I would have taken Spaceballs funny, because should have been obvious to me.
Hey, we all excuse me. We all have those moments where it just it didn't click until someone's like, "Hey, wasn't that funny?" And you're like, "Oh my gosh, yes." Oh, and then you have the floodgates.
Yeah. Yep. That's what I'm going through.
Yeah, which is fine. So, like, we kind of go through this little a very effective montage, because each montage isn't just like, oh, it's a 2-line thing of this. They're each, like, kind of individual scenes, and they focus this all on the county fair. So they're in another county. It's a few years later, and Victoria and Tennessee are, like, weaving through the fair while their father is trying to sell snake oil, and
literal snake oil,
like literal snake oil.
Yep.
As a magic elixir for all ailments, and yep. They end up finding themselves outside of a psychic tent. Now, this is something that you pointed out, and I'll give the floor to you, Adega, because I thought, the fee for the psychics was outrageous for 18.
Right.
50s.
No, that was my first thing. But them.
Oh, I think you cut out for a second.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Oh, I've been cutting out pretty hard, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But it was the setting of them going to this fair and then seeing the psychic and sneaking in, those type of things was totally believable. Mm-hmm. Kids did that all the time. I could tell you stories of people in my family, but $250 to see a psychic was unbelievable. That was like 2 weeks' pay for an adult at the time.
Yeah,
it would have been maybe a penny, 2 pennies at most. But I thought, wow, someone didn't do their homework on how much it cost.
Yeah, or they're just making fun. Exactly, like it's either you didn't do your homework or you're making fun of the idea of, like, oh, $2. Like, wait a minute, that's like today's money of, like, really cheap things, not
right.
1850s, $2. Yeah, 2 weeks' pay. You're living off of. I mean, it reminds me of that joke in A Million Ways to Die in the West, which is not one of my favorite films, but they have this whole bit about $1. Like, no one's ever seen $1, and then the guy holds up an actual paper dollar, and they all like are aghast, and they take off their hats and they hold it over their heart. Wow, that's a dollar bill. Never seen one of those before. It's
Just for comparison, there's a difference between greenbacks and the value of a dollar and that
mhm.
type of thing. But two greenbacks, the dollar's name was actually not quite fully caught on yet. Um, it would have been equivalent to somewhere around $50.
Yeah.
So, and then back at that time, people could live off bucks a week easy. So it was one of those things I hung on to too hard. But
Oh,
it's true. You're
100%. Like if you had $1,000 in 1850, you were set for life.
Oh yeah.
Like, like you were done. It's like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
retired. Because even like again, because the United States was expanding, you could get land for free if you just said, yeah, you're responsible for trying to turn it into something. There you go. You got $1,000 in a plot of land. You're golden.
Yep. Yep.
But yes, so the sisters they find this psychic that has an advertisement up front that says psychic sisters $2. And what's kind of fascinating here is that Victoria picks up right away that this is a grift, a fraud, a scam, a flim flam,
Hmm. Hmm.
all the things. Um, and of course she's and her sister are thinking, you know what, this would be a good way for us to make money because they have three older sisters, and their father's essentially kind of renting them out, and that's the most polite way I can say it.
Right. Right.
And they don't want that, and so they decide, okay, we will. They'll dress themselves up as like exotic psychics, and charge around $2, or in this case, or in some cases $2.50 to tell of people's future. And one of the things that they do to do this is they get like their bed sheets and they kind of like stitch them around to look like costumes. And
Hmm.
of course, they also advertise as a psychic sisters. So Tennessee is kind of luring in the people with the possibility of something. And then we have Victoria coming in and says, okay, like she's doing that. Who is that Edwards guy that was a popular TV psychic for a while? She's just doing that thing. Like I'm feeling someone with an M. You met a man. Yes, I did meet a man. Yes, I see a wife and babies in your future. Oh my God, I'm so happy.
Right. Right.
It's like, yes, and he's in this room right now. Oh, I can't see him. Well, I can't spoil everything for you, so you'll just have to go find him yourself. And it's just pure manipulation of this person who wants who Victoria's picked up what she wants, told her that she wants it, and that if she just wanders through the audience here looking at various men, she will pick the man that she'll end up being with, because they're all just gonna say, oh, look at this woman has just approached me and she wants a future with me. I've just saved myself all the effort of courting because the psychics told her just to come find me. And
But that was actually a big thing back then. So I
yeah.
kind of caught on to that because the spiritualism and the psychic stuff, that was huge. And it made it later on, we're going to talk about Vanderbilt a little bit, but it made it completely believable because that was the realm that these people lived in.
Yeah, and the other part too, you're talking about a society of difficulty and struggle, and you have this entertaining value of hope, but it's also at the exploitation of the people. Like again, because they're
Right.
charging tons of cash to be given affirmations or a nudge in a direction that they're probably getting told the exact same thing from their family and friends, and now they're just paying someone else for it, and then saying, well, because I paid you, I should listen to you, as opposed to the people in your world that are saying, no, you can go do this, you can go do that.
Right. Right. And
Yeah.
an outsider will always have a little bit more. Find this with the healthcare in my life, dealing with people.
Hmm.
When you hear it from somebody who's a professional, people will take that a lot more serious than if it's a family member or your buddy or what have you. So these kids, and there were several different stories back at the time too, where people they were documented as seeing, or supposedly documented, of these sisters were seeing visions or
Hmm.
other people talking to the dead, and all of it said that they had some sort of credible witness to it. And again, it was highly believable. For these two girls to say they were, not a stretch at all. That was very easy for that to happen.
Exactly, and we get this another little joke where the police go to the Psychic Sisters of Victoria in Tennessee,
Right.
and
Right.
Victoria just says it was the boyfriend with the axe in the back of the house. I'm like, that's Clue. That's you're just giving us the framework for Clue, and then the police, what they say? Well, it's always the boyfriend, shaking their heads like they're just accepting it. And yeah, I mean, and this kind of takes her. Takes her and Tennessee sort of off the market that her older sisters are at. And then we also find out, like, there's this lovesick girl who's upset that, the man that she loves says that he loved her, and then out of nowhere she's marrying her sister Sarah, and Tennessee just says, well, Sarah's pregnant.
Right.
And Victoria can't help but, like, swallow her laugh, and of course, she's shocked by this answer. She's like, no, it can't be the case. And then she calms herself down. She's like, well, what else do you know? And then the girl, this lovesick girl, just hands over some more money to the kids. And you can see how they know this. They know exactly what they're doing. And so we follow them just for a little bit. We see that, the older sister Utica is, being winked at by a group of teenage boys. Their mother is losing her mind, and then is having her own little party praying to God, as always. And her father, Buck, is, being complimented by creepy guys of his beautiful daughters, and he's kind of negotiating things. Way to say it. And and so we get a little bit of, like, this is how their life has been. They're essentially going from county fair to county fair, pulling this script, doing these types of things, until one day,
original carnies,
yeah, the original carnies, and. And and then we cut to Victoria, who she has, like, a flu, and her mother is freaking out because she's worried her daughter is going to die. Victoria is like 15 at this point, and they get in the local doctor, who's a very good-looking man, so good-looking,
twice her age, but yeah,
twice her age, so good-looking that Victoria, even while she is vomiting, is calculating ways where this man, who is a doctor, which is, of course, a very high, prestigious position, who she's plotting ways to find a way for him to take her away from her family. And this guy's name is Canning Woodhull. And what's funny is he introduces himself as, like, yeah, my uncle's a mayor of New York. And then the narrator says he isn't.
Right.
And so we clearly understand that Canning Woodhull is also a little bit of a grifter in his own right. Yes, he is a licensed doctor. Yes, he does happen to help Victoria recover. And then Victoria, while they're kind of catching up a little bit later on at another fair, she talks about how she's a psychic, and she says, I see a woman in your future who has brown hair and blue eyes, and Canning is just not clicking that she's describing her to him,
right,
until she says, and she's wearing red shoes, and then it clicks for him. And we kind of do a time jump to a little bit later, where they are now married and they're heading off on the carriage, and of course the mother is terrified of losing her daughter, but has to see her go. And of course Tennessee is crying. She's desperate to go with Victoria. She doesn't want to stay behind with her family. She doesn't want to have her life pulled into the same direction of her other sisters. But Victoria says, don't worry, I'm going to come back for you. As soon as we get stuff settled here, I'm coming back to you. And then we have a scene of, 15 years later, Victoria coming back, but apparently this is all a dream. It didn't happen this way. The narrator, even the writer, is telling us this is just a high action fantasy scene, but it didn't go down like this. But for the purposes of the story, this is how it is. And the story is like a carriage comes, like, bustling through. Victoria leaps out of the moving carriage and lands like a cat, hugs her sister, and then they rush back to the carriage and take off like it's a Wild Western escape from
Jailbreak, yeah.
from a jail. And then we find out that Victoria's husband is gone, and she's married a man named the Colonel.
Colonel Blood.
Colonel Blood. And when Tennessee asks about this, Victoria says, "Yeah, I killed Canning." And she's like, "Really?" He's like, "No, I divorced him." But yes, Colonel Blood is her new husband. Victoria has 2 children. A girl that is quite, eager, clever, and then a boy who is, this writer says, shows signs of early autism, early cases of autism. But we're in the 1860s. We're post-Civil War, and of course they're in this really tiny little house. Not much really going on in their lives. Colonel Blood, after having served, has basically said he's retired now, and he doesn't make any money. So it's all been Victoria scraping together, doing her grifts to make ends meet. But now that she and Tennessee are reunited, they're getting back into the psychic business again. But they don't know exactly how to do that yet. They have this tiny little shop. They're not in New York yet, but they want to get out there. And through some of their female connections that they have learned over the years, they kind of make friends with women who work a brothel. And we get there's a news story that circulates in the papers and it's also being gossiped around in the streets that Vanderbilt, who is like the richest man in the world at this time, is into the spirits and is trying to,
which he was.
That was
a heuristic accurate thing there, yeah.
And so Victoria and Tennessee figure out, ask themselves, well, if he's the richest man in the world, and if we could somehow be his psychics, we could make a good living. And this was probably a very clever, for its time, way for a psychic to get a job. Because what they end up doing is they get into their finest clothes, which they're not that nice. They go out to his residence, knock on the door. The maid opens up, and Victoria says, "Yes, we are psychics, and we're here to see your boss, and we don't have an appointment." The maid asks, "Like, do you have an appointment?" She's like, "No, we don't." And then the maid says, "Well, why should I let you in?" And Victoria says, "Because Mr. Vanderbilt's mother sent us here."
Yes. That was pretty smart.
That was really smart. And this is how they get into a little bit more, like they start making a lot of money. Like Vanderbilt is paying them hundreds of dollars a week to talk to his dead mother. We find out that he's been divorced many times. He likes groping Tennessee and Victoria during their sessions. And they also, at the same time, they're also befriending Josie Mansfield, who is one of the brothel patrons. And she's spilling, quote unquote, the tea of the going-ons at the brothel, what she overhears and whatnot. And we find out that Josie is one of her clients. She has one client that's in the railroad industry, another client that's in banking, another client that's in stocks. And so she tells, for a little bit of money, Josie tells Victoria what she knows, and then Victoria gives tips by way of a medium to Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt is making some great money as a result of this. And so is Victoria, so is Josie is even doing it because she's buying assets with her little money into those things and making some decent returns. And it's a nice little clever network of criminality here.
I think from what I was able to read through, it seemed like a lot of that was actually, the railroad and the stock market and those were all accurate, but the tie-in between Victoria and Vanderbilt, I think that was pretty close.
Yeah.
How she got her money. But there's details in the brothel what they heard this, and the others may not have been, but it that I think was pretty accurate. That's where she got her start with.
I think that's also the case too, because even when I was trying to do some additional like on the side research of her, and there's a lot about this crazy lady.
Yeah.
It was a little bit tricky to kind of sift through, like, well, what's the rumor, what's documented fact, what have you. I will say with Josie being their kind of like their spy, it really does bring a whole new context to the term insider trading. Because again, all of these conversations are happening while they're in the throes of passions with these prostitutes. And one of Josie's gimmicks is that she claims that she's deaf. So they all can talk freely around her, and they don't realize that she knows exactly what's going on. She just feigns it. So this kind of like helps build Tennessee and Victoria a reputation of being confidence to Vanderbilt. And Cornelius he invites them to some various parties and dinners where other men are there, especially when it comes to, there's like one that's a stockbroker, and the stockbroker is really annoyed that his advice to Cornelius wasn't taken and that Victoria's was. And he makes an offhand remark, about what was the term? It was like a squirrel or some sort of animal, like, making a decision. And then Victoria,
find a nut
the squirrel finding a nut every once in a while. And Victoria makes a joke like, yeah, but this squirrel could probably take your job.
Right.
And then we get into kind of like, for any history buffs out there, we get into, of course, the Great Crash in 1871, right? Yeah, it's 71.
Yeah. No, actually it was 69.
69, that's right, 69.
And a lot of it was kind of accurate, and some of it wasn't, because and I'm sorry, I was running numbers and checking facts and figures, and the value of the greenbacks was off by 10, and their limit up and their limit down, and when things were sold was the person he was close, but the author, she was close but didn't get it right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a little hung up on those little details, but it was pretty close. The thing that got me, though, was I didn't realize this tie-in with Edison with a lot of this.
Oh, yeah. That kind of came out of left field. But so Josie overhears a plot with the railway companies and with the people buying up gold that they're basically trying to triple or quadruple the value of assets that they have by manipulating markets.
Mm-hmm.
And so Josie tells Victoria this, and Josie says, "I've already taken my precautions. I know what I'm going to do to get out ahead of this, because these guys told me, without telling me. But right. Here you go for some cash to do this." And so they take it to Cornelius Vanderbilt, and he says, "Well, that's all well and said, but I can't do that, because the moment I start buying things of this nature, people are going to look a little closer at it, and then the very thing that you're telling me is going to happen might not happen. If anything, I could all go to jail. I could lose my fortune." And then Victoria says, "Well, I could buy it for you. No one would be looking at me if I did it." And Cornelius gets a little intrigued, and she basically says the deal is this, like, I'll buy it for you, and then my cut is 50%. Which means that if this action allows him to double his money, he loses nothing, and of course Victoria gains everything. Which is, pretty good deal for Victoria, but Vanderbilt doesn't really see it that way. But what they end up doing is,
she offered him, it's 20% for my sister, 20% for me, 10% for me,
10% for the spirits.
Yeah.
Like she squares the math so that Cornelius feels like it's right, but she's really just, she's grifting him.
Right.
So he gives her like $100,000. She goes to the bank or the gold depository and buys $100,000 of gold, and then her and Tennessee live in their carriage outside the bank for like 3 or 4 days. Like just smelling horrible. Like they're not leaving because they're waiting, because the moment that these ne'er-do-wellers trigger the market, like the gold value is going to shoot up and then immediately depreciate. And Josie has to, when she hears that that's going to happen, she has to make a beeline to wherever Victoria is and tell her so that she can, sell before the value so ends up becoming worthless. And then you get this funny scene where, in the heat of passion, Josie's client is saying it's happening right now. And then as soon as he's done, she kind of gets up, cleans herself off, and says, okay, see you later. Which, of course, the guy doesn't care that she's leaving. And she rushes over to Victoria's carriage where they've got a gun. They're holding on to all their assets. And they got little 10-year-old boys as runners, and they're making communications. And so she, as gold value starts going up, and we get introduced to Thomas Edison, who is working the machine, the numbers to show the increase of gold as these transactions are coming in. Victoria sends a runner to the bank and says, we're selling everything, selling all the assets, all the gold. And even the banker's like, are you sure? And she's like, yes, we're doing that. And so we get this scene of people are excited, like gold's going up, they're buying. And then all of a sudden the price starts to go down slowly and then dramatically. And people are freaking out like, what's going on? This is terrible. Oh my God, I'm going to lose everything.
The story, and this is another thing that got me, that now that I look at it, it's better the way the story told it, not the way reality was. Because if there were some bad people in the government, and they decided, well, they for some reason they logicked it out. If they would sell 20 million in gold to the public, that it would mediate the collapse,
right?
But it didn't. It made these banker people like Vanderbilt and the rest of them just enormously more wealthy, and everyone else lost their shirts. There were suicides at the time. There were other problems that people went through.
There were political regime changes as a result of this.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
But so when they come at the end of the day, we get Victoria has reconnected with Tennessee in the carriage, and Tennessee's asking, well, how much did we make? And then this is where we get something that's a little funny, because she's like saying, we got, $700,000. But the narrator says, that's not how much they said they made, but it was probably less. And then Victoria has another line that's corrected, $500,000. And narrator says, well, whatever it was a lot. And then Tennessee and Victoria say, $350,000. And they're like screaming and laughing and cheering. And of course, they take that 50% goes back to Vanderbilt, so he gets 175. 175, and Victoria and Tennessee get their 175. And what do they do with it? Well, they rent a mansion for themselves, so it's for her two kids.
Like anyone who wins the lottery, they don't know how to take care of the money.
That's right. They rent a mansion, they get it fully furnished. Colonel Blood is super happy because he's can live off his wife's money. And then they open up a brokerage firm in New York. Which is absurd because they don't know anything about the stock market. And they get a lot of attention at first because it's the first brokerage firm run by women.
Well, they had a reputation, though. And it was...
Yeah. They have the reputation. And then there's a couple of silly aspects where even men on the street, when they go by the brokerage firm, they drop trow and pleasure themselves into the glass. And it's really like...
Well, they have a whole herd of that all the prostitutes are working for them.
Yeah, that's the other part, too, is like the prostitutes aren't really in the office, but they'll pop in, give Tennessee or Victoria tips, and then go back to work, and they do so in exchange for some cash. And all while this is happening, Susan B. Anthony and her partner in crime, actual partner in crime, not real partner, was Elizabeth Cady Stanton, are on the speaking circuit. And this intrigues, of course, Victoria and Tennessee, because what they find out is, number one, these two are very popular, and they make several $100s every speaking engagement. And Victoria thinks, this is a nice opportunity for cash flow. If we can get in with these people, we can make some additional money too, and really showcase how awesome Victoria is with her wit, her guile, and her her success, because even though they spent this money on their house, even though they've bought their brokerage firm, nobody is using their services, and now they're spending more. And it takes Colonel Blood, who both Tennessee and Victoria think is an idiot, to remind them that we have more money going out than we have coming in. So we need to make sure that we spend wisely. And this is where Victoria has a plot to basically integrate or replace Susan B. Anthony on the speaking circuit so that she can make regular cash to maintain this brand new lifestyle of hers in New York City. And one of the things that's rather fascinating about this script is that each grift that these two girls do is broken up with a chapter. So
yeah, I didn't notice that, but you're right.
Yeah, so let me just see if I can. Yeah, here we go. So we have like chapter 1 is like the beginning, chapter 2 is the city, chapter 3 is called the women, chapter 4 is the wagon, and then chapter 5 is the hypocrite, and then chapter 6, of course, is the end. But
I did like at this point. This is where I started to notice more and more because, like I said, the first time through, and this is basically the second time through, but going through it, I was quite frustrated with it. But then I started to notice, wait, every grift they do, they pay the price for it.
Yeah. Exactly.
They don't come out ahead every time, and I'm thinking, okay, I can follow along now. This is getting more fun to read about because she's not as smart as she thinks she is. There's a penalty each time. They do pay for it.
They do, and I like how they pay for it because the first real grift is Victoria marrying the doctor, not realizing that the doctor is also grifting. So she gets a little bit ahead, but then one step forward, 2 steps back type of thing. And then that 2 steps back puts her into Colonel Blood.
Yeah, but there's that scene too that I thought was kind of horrific, and it really showed the penalty for it, where she was having the second child and he ran out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that was a great flashback because he's drinking while she's going through labor, and he's kind of trying to help at first, but then she demands a doctor, and he's like, I am a doctor. She's like, a real doctor. And he gets insulted by that and leaves, and he goes to the bar, and then you get this very dramatic birth of her daughter, where it is painful, and this is where I did laugh and go ooh, because she severs the umbilical cord with her teeth. And
yeah, well, that's not that uncommon for back then, but yeah,
it's not that uncommon. But I think it's done especially for a lot more dramatic effect than anything else. Right. Because it's trying to showcase like, oh, this Victoria woman, she's supposed to be super tough, but she may be tough, but she doesn't quite think that far ahead, or even care about the possible consequences of her actions either. And I like how with every conclusion of the act, of each chapter, we see the seeds of the consequence of her actions, and realize that she's kind of jumping from ship to ship, and she's the reason why each previous ship is also sinking. And so that takes us to the next chapter, which is the women, which is where Victoria manages, because she is a woman who has started her own brokerage firm in New York City. She gets the attention of Susan B. Anthony, who wants to interview her because Susan B. Anthony runs a small, modest paper promoting accomplishments of women, while she is also fighting for the women's right to vote. And this is also at the same time where they're going through the 14th Amendment. Yes, 14th Amendment, right? Yes.
Yeah, you got it right.
14th Amendment.
No,
because 15th Amendment is something else.
Yeah,
okay. 14th Amendment, which is to have the black men to get the vote. And of course, Susan B. Anthony is saying, well, women deserve it now before the black men. And it's kind of, a very touchy subject, because the Civil War has just ended. Emancipation Proclamation has been done. Laws have been put in place that grant freedom to black slaves, and yet they still don't have all the full rights available to them. And what we have here is we have Susan B. Anthony. She interviews Victoria, who interviews fairly well, so to speak. Doesn't tip her hat too much. Susan B. Anthony, I like how they depict her as inferring certain positivities of all women around her, as opposed to digging deeper into the women that she's talking with. Because when Susan is asking about Victoria's father, well, Victoria talks around, saying like he was a jack of all trades. He understood that the world runs on money, and he taught my sister and I most of what we know. And this is all true, but Susan B. Anthony says, "Oh, so your father believed in girls should get a decent education. He was a good man." And Victoria's like, "Yeah, the good ones are few and far between, aren't they?" And she's not saying anything to affirm what Susan's speculations are. But you can kind of see that Victoria is playing her at this, and Susan is depicted as not clever enough to pick up the doublespeak or the talking around of things with Victoria and her past.
She didn't know her enough, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, accurately, not taking ourselves out of the satire, but accurately, I'm sure she was quite sharp when it came to that. She had to have been able to read people to be able to become as prominent as she was.
Oh yeah, I mean, she definitely recognized the follies of most general human behavior and desperation, and thrived off that quite well. But she also didn't recognize them in herself, as we see in this story about her, because as soon as money comes in, it goes out. Why? For immediate gratification and pleasure and prestige. And she does have a secret spot in the floorboard of her house where she stashes, well, first some money, but mostly articles from the newspaper about her, whether they're good or bad.
Right.
So very narcissistic character. And what this takes us to a National Women's Suffrage Association meeting or speaking event at the Apollo Hall, and this is where we have this huge debate, not just with Susan B. Anthony, but also with some members of the crowd, talking about how the black men should be given the right to vote first, granting them citizenship and all the rights and privileges that come with that before women. And we have this debate between Susan B. Anthony is trying to argue, well, even to a black woman, saying, well, like, if we get women to vote, you get to vote. She's like, yeah, I happen to be a woman, but I haven't, and I may have gone through similar pains that other women have. But she gives this really great counter argument. It's like, but I'm also black, and that comes with more stuff on top of it. And the whole concept of the 14th Amendment is, the black part being, addressed, and if that can come first, then that puts us in a step closer to the next part, which is what Susan B. Anthony wants. And
right, and in reality too, the blacks getting the vote was a heck of a lot easier, simply because in order to vote back then, it was kind of going out, and they had to break it with the women's suffrage thing. Mm-hmm. Was that in order to vote, you had to own property for the longest time, and then it went to just the other part of it, but it went to the one where you also had to be registered for the draft, and that's why they had so much opposition. Women didn't want to register for the draft.
Right. So yeah, those complications, the whole "I want this but not at this expense" type of stuff, that is part of the debate that was going on at the time, and this script touches on this quite well. Excuse me. They even bring up Frederick Douglass a few times, and he even has a speech here, which I think is supposed to be as best recorded from at the time it was given.
I was going to look it up. I have it in one of my books here, but I didn't pull it out to see how accurate it was. But I do have it somewhere.
But he gives this this speech that, like, there's no greater name than that of Elizabeth Cady Stanton in the matter of equal rights and women's rights. And he goes on this. But when women, because they are women, are hunted down, when they are dragged from their houses and hung up lampposts, when their children are torn from their arms and their brains dashed upon the pavement, when they are objects of insult and outrage at every turn, when they are in danger of having their houses burnt down over their heads, then they will have an urgency to obtain the ballot equal to our own. Because he was arguing about, the crimes put against their people after
Right.
the emancipation,
Right.
and he's basically saying, like, if we can get the right to vote, these issues that we're facing right now will be mitigated, and that is why there's urgency more so on our part versus on women's part, because they're not facing all of these trials and tribulations. So I thought, okay, I appreciated the argument, but then I like how Elizabeth Cady Stanton kind of puts her foot in her mouth along with Susan B. Anthony. That really does. I mean, if that spread on like social media today, it would completely set back their movement by like decades. I'm not going to utter it here because it is a little touchy, but I thought that was a kind of a good scene, and I liked how Victoria is only an audience member there, but what she manages to do, she manages to see Joe Green, our reporter, who's kind of dictating above the narrator of this story that we're experiencing here, is trying to get quotes from the people there. And Victoria, pretending to be important, defends that Mr. Douglas made a compelling argument and support.
Snuck in to begin with, I think. So she coming out, not being a normal person. The reporter assumed that they were part of the
part of the caucus or something.
There, and they were actually invitees when they had actually snuck in.
Yeah,
but that was a history of things that they did. They snuck in there. They snuck in as a child. Then there's another scene up ahead that we get into. But that was one thing that Victoria was really good at, and it repeats over and over again, because we see that all of her schemes fail, but she's able to assess what's going on and be able to kind of make a rudimentary but very effective plan on how to take advantage of that and manipulate it to her gain. And so, like you said, she runs into this reporter, and she knows exactly what to say.
She knows exactly what to say. And when Joe asks her, "Are you a member of the women's movement?" and she goes, "I am," and of course he asks her another question, and she says, he asked her a question about how can women say they have enough on their plates raising children and taking care of them, but also want to get the vote? And of course, Victoria says, well, good thing women can do two things at once. And she claims that she's perfectly happy and capable of raising both her daughter and fighting for her freedom all at the same afternoon. Joe thinks that's a great quote, and she gives her name. And Tennessee also gives her, says her name as well. And Joe's like, what's this for? And she's saying, like, for your paper, attribute these quotes to us. And we go to the next, a little bit days in the future. And they're, of course, scavenging through all the newspapers, trying to find if they've been quoted. And Tennessee finds the quote. And then the quote is as follows: women's rights activist Victoria Woodhill attends the convention with Mrs. Tennessee Clavin. So he doesn't even get her Tennessee's surname right, and also assumes that she's married. And of course, Tennessee is like thrown off by this, but Victoria just snatches the paper dramatically right out of Tennessee's hands and is just enamored with reading her words in print. And I thought that's pretty funny, and also it's a great like reminder of how ostentatious and superficial and selfish Victoria is at this point. And this takes us on to, her efforts to try and get more and more attention, just building up a reputation, because she doesn't know what she can do at this point to sort of keep on making money. She's got her name in the paper, so she's getting a reputation, but how does she turn that into something that is lucrative for her? And
yeah, because she's trying to get on the circuit, trying to be with Susan. It doesn't work out.
It doesn't work out because Susan doesn't really want more voices like Victoria's, which are very strong, very authoritative, and also because Victoria is being described as more attractive than Susan B. Anthony, there's that aspect of competition as well. And this takes her into trying to figure out, well, okay, how do I get onto speaking engagements? How can I get enough attention? And
just needs to get money.
Just needs to get money, and this is where, she kind of is spitballing ideas. With Tennessee.
There's also the idea that ran around that she started to play with, where they found out in the Constitution in the previous articles, it doesn't say, when they gave the blacks the right to vote, it doesn't say that black men. Also in the Constitution, it didn't really stipulate so much. They started to try and play that loophole. She saw an in that.
Yes, she did. And she saw a little bit of, well, she didn't quite see the in. She learns more about this end later because they were able to make they made a lot of money. Colonel Blood is reminding him again that we're going to be bankrupt by the end of the year, and she's trying to think like, well, if I join the suffrage movement, the tickets are so much a year, that could be 300 people in there, that's $1,500 or so a night alone to give lectures. The only way she can give lectures is if she gets as popular as Susan B. Anthony, and of course Tennessee reminds her like, we're not as popular as Susan B. Anthony. Of course, Victoria's making all these arguments like, oh my gosh, we're the first women on Wall Street. That should be a great selling point, and Tennessee's like, well, until they realize that our business is going under.
Yeah, and they couldn't go back to Vanderbilt because he got married and he didn't start talking to him, so that avenue was gone.
So he's gotten married recently, and his new wife doesn't want the psychics around. Of course, Victoria realizes like, well, we could go into politics because men BS themselves from banking to politics all the time. It's like an overnight success for a mediocre businessman becomes president of the United States. And of course, Colonel Blood is like, well, he remarks how Elizabeth Cady Stanton did attempt to run for Congress, and to do so to prove that the Constitution doesn't expressly prohibit it. You can't vote, but you can technically run. And what's funny is that Blood is the one with this idea. Victoria has no idea about this. So even though she looks at Blood like he's a moron, he's the only one that's actually figuring out ways for them to make money. And Victoria and Tennessee are kind of just lost in speculation. And of course, Tennessee thinks that it'd be insane for Victoria to run for Congress. And she says, I'm not going to run for Congress. I'm going to run for something bigger. And that leads her to say, I'm running for president. And of course, Victoria laughs, thinking this is, brilliant. Tennessee doesn't think this is possible. But she says, no, there's definitely a way we can pull this off. And Colonel Blood is thinking like, okay, this is going to be a very peculiar thing. Like she remarks something of like, you really can't think of anything other than being a prostitute or running for president of the United States as a form of income. And Colonel Blood makes this offhanded remark like, well, what's the difference? Because everybody, when it comes to whether you're, between the sheets or on the streets, you're still putting yourself out there in exchange for money. And I'm like, that's kind of insightful for that. And
yeah, they didn't take it that way, but he was actually, that was pretty insightful.
Yeah.
They looked at him like he was an idiot, but he was right.
Yeah, he's not wrong. And so at this point here, they're like, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to write a letter to the Herald announcing her candidacy for president. And so she goes into this, and when I was reading this the second time, I could see it being like with a crescendo of music, like kind of building up behind her as she's dictating a letter to Victoria. And what's funny is the oh gosh, what was it? She says, therefore I claim the right to speak for the unenfranchised. And Colonel Blood's like, that's not a word. And she's like, shut up. I claim the right to speak for the unenfranchised women of this country. And believing, she does this whole little tirade, and crickets. Dude, like the Herald doesn't run it. Nothing is moving. Later, the rumor kind of spreads, and we get a little side scene of President Ulysses S. Grant at his desk eating a stack of blueberry pancakes. He basically, one of his aides says, "Oh yeah, there's this person who just, the rumors come out through that's kind of making waves. This woman has announced that she's going to run for president." He says it's Victoria Woodhull, and he's like, Victor? He's like, no, Victoria, a woman? Yes, sir. Is this a joke? He's like, and so he's like, well, it's quite funny, sir, one must admit. And of course, Ulysses S. Grant is being kind of portrayed as a very loud, buoyant type of braggart, so to speak, laughing, yelling, a little bit of gluttony there. But one of the things that the presidential aide informs of Grant, which is funny, is that even if she were to win, she still couldn't be president because she'll only be 34 by Inauguration Day. So she'd be 1 year shy of being able to hold the office of president, which is funny because this is now a little bit of a dramatic irony for us, because now we know something that Victoria hasn't put together. Like, she can run all she wants, but the Constitution, the one part of the Constitution she couldn't get around, has to do with her date of birth. She's 1 year behind. So this takes us into...
I can't tell if I'm cutting in or out.
Oh no, you're good right now. So you're good.
Okay.
So
it's dropping on and off. So I'm glad you're talking on, because I'm catching 80% of it.
Okay. That stinks a little. But I do. I want to throw it a little bit to you, like, because there is Susan B. Anthony learns of this announcement, and how do you find her take, the author's take, the writer's take on this learning of Victoria running for president?
If I remember that part of the conversation correctly, well, she never really liked Victoria much more than wanting to use her for reputation for her movement. Mm-hmm. But then when she saw that she was going to run for president, and rightly, I think, she said the ludicrousy of it was going to set back the movement. It was going to make them look like a whole bunch of fools. And Susan B. was right on that. But it had been tried before. We don't, history doesn't always tell you everything, because I had mentioned this to Script before. It was the Shakers. About 30 years beforehand, their woman leader then had also tried it. Everybody was trying it. So Victoria was not the first. Woodhull was not the first one to try it, but she was, obviously, since her tie-in with Susan B. and the publicity of the other people that she was connected with, made it so that everyone remembers her as the first, even though she wasn't.
Like the most prominent, yeah.
Right. But Susan B. was pretty witty about this. She knew that this was, she was starting to sense the grift. Mm-hmm. That this was more about her trying to come in and take over the women's movement, and actually it would do more harm than good. So her wires got crossed, and she decided, you know what, this is not good.
No, it's not good. And then this announcement gains some pretty heavy attention throughout the Northeast, because Victoria's father and mother and sisters come showing up at their home.
Oh, that was I caught this as hilarious. That made me think of like the Beverly Hillbillies moving in.
Yeah.
I really thought that was funny, though. That was the first part of comedy I caught on this.
Oh yeah, it was great because the snake oil salesman dad is there. He knocks on the door. Victoria opens it, and his first words out of his mouth is "my girls," and of course, Victoria's instinct is to slam the door right in the face, but she can't do it because all of these the grandkids start bursting through into the house. The mother's in there, Utica, Polly, Meg, all the sisters, all their kids from their ill-gotten affairs are just kind of taking over the house, and Victoria's freaking out because she doesn't want them here because she's terrified that this will ruin her image. And it would definitely ruin her image.
This is where we have the beginnings of the Homeowners Association.
Yes.
because of the neighbors were paying attention.
Paying attention to her now. So it's pretty funny. Until Tennessee realizes, well, you can't kick them out, because if you kick them out, they'll probably go to the press and do everything that you're fearing of doing. If you have them here, you can control them. And Victoria is really caught between a bind because she hates these people, but she also can't. She can't let them out on their own, which reminds me of a clever gimmick from a British sitcom called Keeping Up Appearances.
I love that show.
Which I enjoy too, because you have Hyacinth Bucket, or Bouquet as she likes to be called, and she regularly goes to visit her sister, really for no reason other than to just, she loves her sister, but she's embarrassed by her sister, and her sister, her husband Onslow, and her father, they all live in, like, council housing, and they've all got some sort of crazy scheme going on, and you can tell, like, and every time she's out in the other parts of London, doing her chores or her errands, and her sister happens to be in the neighborhood, she tries to pretend like she doesn't know who they are.
Right.
And yeah, good comedy ensues because it's all embarrassing and image. And Victoria is really, like, she's in that position right now. She's like trying to control and tell her family, you do not get to touch anything. Even she even catches her father trying to, like, pocket statues and things off the banisters and
then it goes into the kitchen where they're all making the chicken dinner and it was totally redneck. I mean, it wasn't even hillbilly, it was redneck.
Yes. And yeah, it was very, like, I thought this was a nice little point of chaos for like physical chaos that Victoria's going through, because up until this point it's all psychological. It's like, okay, how do you organize this stuff? How do you get it working? How do you get the momentum? And all of a sudden now the very family she escaped has come back home to wreak havoc in a whole new way, and really kind of push her to her limits, which I thought was brilliant. I really had fun with this, because it doesn't just end with her parents coming in. Canning returns, and he's yellow in the skin, possibly with jaundice, and he's claiming he's dying. And Victoria's response to that is, go to hell.
And that's not the end of it either, because I thought it was a really nice touch when they were starting to do the publication. They decided they're going to do a newspaper as well as their financial collapse. And then dear old dad tries to weasel in with his snake oil for an advertisement inside their paper.
She's like,
that was a nice touch.
Yeah. Which was it was great, but somehow, like, Victoria's ex-husband weasels his way into his home because he wants to spend time with his children before he departs, at least, or so he claims. Blood doesn't like this either. He's like, I don't want this guy in my house. And Victoria has to remind him, well, it's my house, because you don't do anything. So this
he's not even on the picture above the mantle. It's the two sisters.
It's the two sisters. Yeah, they commissioned their own portrait above the mantle of the fireplace, and yeah, he thinks, well, shouldn't I be in there? She's like, no.
Right.
So yeah, Canning is kind of he's drinking, he's milling about the kitchen. Victoria kind of challenges him, and then they get into a fight where she breaks a bottle and tries to stab him in the throat with it. And I think it's even Colonel has to, like, pull her off and says, number one, he's not staying here. Number two, you can't kill him because you're
right.
It comes with a whole bunch of other consequences. And of course, Colonel Bled is trying to say, like, I'm your husband. I'm not just some guy you can walk all over. I have certain roles and responsibilities here. And Victoria just kind of lashes into him and pretty much says, views Colonel Bled almost the same as she does her ex-husband. It's like, you're a way out of a terrible marriage, a way out of a terrible town, a way out of a terrible family. You're just another person that she needs to support. And she basically says, like, if that upsets you, there's the door. And yeah, and he tries to say, like, you spent all my money getting here. Now you're keeping our money locked up. And Victoria kind of reminds him, like, yeah, you didn't make a dime of this latest of the stuff we've been living off of. And you know, it's a little bit true. Like Colonel Blood, as even though he's clever in one regard, he is a guy who is kind of like, he's lazy, he's given up. He just kind of, you know, is in full retirement mode. Like he doesn't even want to like occupy his time with hobbies or anything. He just sits around and drinks. And yeah, like I don't even know what else he does throughout the day. Really,
well, he was taking care of the kids.
Kind of.
You know, he was cooking. He was doing a few odds and things, but it wasn't anything that he should have been doing. I mean, there wasn't. It didn't prevent him from doing things that he should be doing. I should say that.
Right. Yeah. It didn't take out enough of his. Yeah. It didn't take up enough of his time that he couldn't balance things out there. But
yeah.
But of course, the next strategy is, okay, the announcement for president is done. Her family is in the home. She can keep them here so they don't screw up her chances. But now she has to figure out, like, well, no one's going to take her seriously unless someone important acknowledges her. So how does she find someone important? And this takes us back to the brothel, to Josie. So there is a Halloween party at the house, and Josie has decided to dress up as the Virgin Mary as part of her costume, and she's speaking to a man dressed like the Pope. And she's running her gimmick on him, and Victoria Woodhill shows up, and I can't remember how they're dressed. I think Victoria's dressed like the Statue of Liberty, and Tennessee is Athena with a bow and arrow.
Yeah, and the Statue of Liberty was just I think, what was it? One little statuette at the time. It wasn't the big.
It wasn't the big one because,
right.
Yeah, that hadn't arrived yet, and when it did arrive, the instructions.
It was called terracotta.
Yeah, the instructions were in French, and so they had to send someone who spoke French and English to translate the instructions for the people to assemble it on the island. So what ends up happening is that as they navigate through this Halloween party at this brothel, Josie introduces Victoria to Congressman Benjamin Butler. And this is the guy who is quite taken with Victoria, so much so that he proposes to her, and she's like, no. But he tells her, like, okay, he was once a running mate as on the ticket for president until he was kind of kicked off because people found that he himself was too fond of seeing his name in print. So he
that was Lincoln, yeah.
That was with Lincoln, right? And he clocks Victoria with that type of personality, like right away. He's like, I suspect you know a little bit about something of that. And of course, she hides that behind, I'm fighting for the equality of women, and he's like, yeah, sure you are. I get what you're doing. It's great. And he's the one that tells her, like, well, the 14th Amendment, it says that all citizens have a right to vote, and that right will not be denied. And he has to kind of, spell it out a little bit more to Victoria, because she's not quite clocking it, because he says, like, the 15th says all citizens have the right to vote. It does not specify that those citizens must be. And he's like letting that hang there. And Victoria just doesn't, it's quite says, like, Butler stops, waiting for Victoria to finish the line. She does not. And in fact finds it quite condescending to be quizzed this way. He continues. And he's like, male, which means Congress may have given women the vote already by accident. And of course, they ask, could that actually work? And Butler's like, no, probably not. But I hear crazy arguments on the floor of the House every single day, and that's exactly what those women don't understand. Is when you're in a popularity this is all a popularity contest. You might have the best argument, but it doesn't matter if no one wants to hear you speak. Which is also very true when it comes to social social issues. And Victoria gets the clever idea is like, well, what if a woman spoke before Congress? And he's like, I don't think that's ever happened before. And of course, she kind of flirts with him, saying, well, you have the power to invite me. And he's like, I just can't invite every pretty girl he meets to the Congress. He's like, yeah, but if you invite me, Mr. Butler, the first woman to run for president, I can assure you, your name will be in the paper for weeks. And, of course, that's the clincher. and what happens?
Right.
Well, yeah.
It worked for Victoria. It worked for somebody else who was a narcissist.
Yes, it did. And then, so we go from Halloween of 1872, January 1871, where Victoria Woodhull is about to speak to Congress. And in Washington, D.C. at this time, there is, at the Lincoln Hall, Susan B. Anthony has got her own event being hosted. But no one is showing up because everyone is running to Congress to see Victoria be introduced to be the first woman to speak at Congress. And this really gets Susan B. Anthony's panties in a bunch. Especially when we don't get the speech, which I think was a good choice here, because that might have gone on like 3 or 4 pages for this.
Yeah, I have no idea. I never looked up her speech. I didn't figure out or even have the desire to look it up. So I was with you. It'd probably been a lot of considering her obvious manipulations on a long speech. But anyway, I didn't look it up.
Yeah, I didn't check it out either. I got lost in the weeds of other weird exploits that Victoria was going through at the time, to which there are many. But yeah, basically, Susan B. Anthony is trying to be diplomatic with this, and she realizes that Victoria has gained a footing in the movement that she has not, and her and Elizabeth Cady Stanton are basically saying, we want you to be part of our lecture, and of course Victoria talks about like, yeah, I can still run for president. I think we can all vote. And of course Susan B. Anthony is saying, well, I don't want to be arrested and thrown in jail. Neither does Elizabeth. And Victoria's like, well, we can argue in courts across the country that those arrests are unconstitutional. When Susan B. Anthony challenges that, Victoria says, I read the Constitution, which we know is a lie. She hasn't read it. She's just parroting whatever Butler said. And so what ends up happening is, Victoria says, if I join your circuit, I want the women's movement to endorse me for president. And Susan B. Anthony says, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to endorse Grant because he's promised to help push our cause for his second term. And this causes a divide between Victoria and Susan B. Anthony, because they start seeing her, they start acknowledging her for what she actually is, a fraud. And then we get into the chapter 5, which is the hypocrite. And this is where we meet Lucy Stone, who she is part of the American Women's Suffrage Association. So it's another association. But she's a person that works with a lot of men that are of ill repute and knows a lot about their ill repute. And yeah, so she's a late addition to the script, a very late addition to the script. But she kind of opens up some opportunities for Victoria to learn about some of the gossip going on in New York City, while at the same time she is taking moments in the convention hall, and we start to hear what her sort of platform is as president, and it's quite ridiculous because she's screaming for like no more death penalty and an 8-hour work week, welfare for the poor, national education for children, and of course everybody is cheering. Men in the crowd are like, are you a free lover? And she's like, yes, I'm a free lover. I'm free to love a different man every day of the week if I want to. So this is, of course, making Lucy, who, is of her own movement, thinking like this is a horrible person to represent women, especially for the role of presidency. We need to, find a way to take her down. And then what's funny is that she's talking about how, oh gosh, what was this part here? I have it in my notes. Let me just scroll through because yeah,
Well, we
she
also find out where she can get ammunition against a lot of people that Victoria's eventually going to use. Like there was the minister. I think he was the one who was saying, "You mean free love
yeah.
for everyone?" And the Lucy was sitting there looking at the minister, going, "Really? You shouldn't be like that." But we get to find out a lot more about him that she uses.
That's exactly it, and we keep getting this interspersed with her conventions, and so and this is where definitely on my second reading I knew this was a satire because Victoria has part of the speech saying like religion, marital sanctity, and social purity are a heap of rottenness, which I aim to destroy. Also, Jesus was a socialist, and I'm like, okay, this is funny because this is far more modern day talking points
Right.
of people who are um, are taken away with power and attention to the point where they have no filter or they have no conscience either. Um, and this also goes into like a man says, well, what about eugenics? And she replies, I've heard some very compelling evidence. And then the narrator interrupts and
Yeah.
says, nope, gonna stop you right there. Victoria was very misguided about this, and as were a bunch of other white women at the time, and we're gonna move on because it's not that relevant, but just know she was wrong about this and wrong about a lot of things. Um, and it goes into, certain issues regarding unwanted pregnancy, and basically Victoria says, well, it's murder unless she really needs it, then maybe it's okay, I don't really know. So
Yeah, well,
it's
see, that's part of the problem. Those who know history, that the eugenics and the abortion thing were hand in hand, and
yeah,
we have what's left over it, and that's why the narrator would say, "No, let's not get in there because it can make people mad."
exactly, yeah, that's and so we have like Lucy Stone is basically saying like no one's ever going to take us seriously with this harlot spewing her views all over the place. And so she's basically like, I want to write the people at the paper. I want to write all the important people, like that. This woman is not a representative of us, and then we see that Lucy Stone, she's very much into censorship. She's a prude. The very thing that she's also against is who she is. So she's the hypocrite. Hence the chapter.
Hmm.
But it expands to basically like all the characters that we're viewing here. We're catching them in their hypocrisy. Like Victoria's saying anything she can to gain attention, gain popularity, to gain possible votes. Lucy Stone will say anything she can to get this woman to stop hurting the movement that she feels that she is a prominent player in. Elizabeth Cady Stanton is upset with Victoria because she's kind of taking attention away from the movement itself and making it all about her, which Victoria is very much happy to have. They even talk, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton also helps kind of like spill the tea, so to speak, of Lucy and her associations. And this is where Victoria gets all that gossip, like even more so than you'd ever expect, about how there's this reverend who he is having affairs with several women in his parish. And it's so complicated that he doesn't even remember which ones he's invited to which areas at which time. And so some of these women kind of run into each other when they're prepping, so to speak,
Right.
for their encounter, their religious encounter with the Reverend.
Right.
and apparently this happens, like he schedules this stuff like every day of the week, even after service on Sundays. So yeah, pretty horrible type of guy. But the reason why it's like a publicly known secret is because this preacher, this reverend, he knows everybody, and they all kind of scratch each other's back so that nobody can disrupt the flow of things going on in the city. It's a very fragile house of cards. You pull out one card, and the whole thing comes down. So, everybody is maintaining the status quo for the positions that they have, and Victoria is looking at this as, oh, this is the very thing I need in the event that things go south. And
One moment, if you got,
sure,
and I'm sorry for this, and some of the audience knows too that I'm not a well man physically, and I'm starting to have a little bit of issues on my end, so I'm going to have to sign off.
Okay, well,
But
that's
I do apologize because I try and stick with these things as I can, but today's a little rough.
oh
But
well,
before I go, I do want to give you my, if I
please,
can,
yeah, go right
my
ahead,
vote on this.
please.
Before knowing it was satire, I would have told you to just, let the nearest dog have at it. Um, but having satire, if it was cleaned up some, certain things kind of mellowed out a little bit, other things kind of perked up a bit, I could see it possibly working. It wouldn't require, I mean, the costumes and sets would cost a little bit of money, but it isn't anything that would require a great deal, I would imagine, more than the average television show. So I would say a guarded yes on this one, with those stipulations as a satire and made it
Mhm.
more clean. But before that, like I said, nah, I just flushed that thing.
Yeah,
So
if this
knowing
were,
that I know now, yeah,
yeah, like if this were like an earnest, not satirical part, yeah, toss it to the wind, so to speak. But
yeah, because there's just so much history stuff that's so screwed up, but I can make it funny taking the way it is. So,
well,
but I am sorry, script.
oh no,
I
that's
do need to.
that is quite all right, Adega. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, for giving us your verdict on the script. Yes, you can. You're more than welcome to sign off now. We're going to wrap up the show anyway. So I really appreciate you joining me this Saturday for the show. Always a pleasure,
Always a
and
blast. Always. We'll
and
catch you all later.
we'll catch you all later. Thank you so much, sir. So yeah, with that, guys, I'll do a quick little wrap up here because we see that after a short stint with Victoria and Colonel Blood again, Colonel Blood is officially kicked out of the house. And where does he go? Well, he goes to a bar, starts drinking, starts complaining about his wife, and in that bar happens to be Joe Green. And this takes us back to the start of the story where Joe has heard all these juicy details, everything that Colonel Blood has been exposed to of Victoria, and just tells it all to Joe, bringing us full circle. The article gets published. It exposes Victoria, and she she goes pretty desperate. She loses her ability to publicly speak. Nobody wants to see her at any of the women's movements except for many of the people that have been following her so far. They don't believe the article. It takes us back full circle again to where Susan B. Anthony has technically fired her from the speaking circuit because they don't want this scandal to further damage their movement. And at their next engagement, Victoria and Tennessee managed to sneak back in. They managed to get on stage. Susan B. Anthony is just about to announce her endorsement for President Grant. And as she is speaking, I'm so happy to pronounce my endorsement. That's when Victoria scampers out on stage to a crowd that just explodes in cheers and is excited. And of course, because of Victoria's presence, the audience assumes that Susan B. Anthony is now endorsing Victoria. Victoria quickly speaks over Susan B. Anthony and says, "Thank you so much for the endorsement." She starts to give her little acceptance of the endorsement speech until someone asks, "Well, who's your running mate?" And she hasn't said anything yet. And then someone volunteers. It should be Mr. Douglas for your running mate. And Victoria's like, "Oh yeah, sure. That sounds great. We'll have Mr. Douglas be her running mate." And therefore you get this little aside from the narrator that Frederick Douglass with Victoria Woodhull would become the first mixed ticket in American U.S. history, except for the fact that Frederick Douglass hasn't agreed to this. This is all sort of like news to him, but it's picking up steam and momentum. However, if for those of you that might be aware of the history of things, it does not last. There's more scandal that follows with Frederick Douglass, with Joe Green, with her because when her reputation and her endorsements all kind of fleet away, in order to stay into the populace, she decides to publish the gossip of this reverend and his actions throughout New York. And this leads to her getting arrested, because even though it is technically free speech to share these stories, she did so in such detail that it can be interpreted as pornography and then violates decency laws. So she gets arrested and thrown in jail. And this is partially true to her story. She was arrested. She never was able to. She never got on all the ballots to possibly be an actual contender against Ulysses S. Grant, who won in a landslide for that election. And we end the script with her in jail espousing a speech about how there will be tens of thousands of Victorias like her will rise from her influence, and they'll all be trying to avenge her death and seizing power, seizing the same level of power that she tried to attain, so that they could all follow in her footsteps, which I thought was a very dark ending. But it really did kind of put a button on this for me as a satire, because it works in the sense that every action that she takes that is self-serving comes, as Dega said earlier, comes with consequence. And there's a little catharsis there, because you see this character sort of get their just desserts. And I especially like the irony and the cyclical nature of the fact that after she loses her reputation, no longer able to get speaking engagements, she can't pay the rent on her mansion. And so she and her family, just like when she was a child, having to be pulled out of school, are on the run from her landlord, who is chasing after them because they owe him rent that they weren't able to pay. And they end up living in the one piece of property that they own, which is their brokerage firm, where they start doing their paper, which then gets immediately shut down because of the publications of these rumors and stories in such graphic detail that it violates decency laws. So her own arrogance, her own desperation, and her own ambition lead to her downfall, which is pretty good for a comedy. So, like with Adega, I would say, with a minor tweak in establishing a bit more of a stronger satirical tone in the first act, I think this would be a worthy script. It's definitely not like a mainstream comedy. It's more like a dark comedy, kind of like an I Love You, Philip Morris sort of tone type of thing. So not with everyone's taste, but it definitely has an interesting place. And for a period piece, making fun of a historical figure who has a very what's the best descriptive word for that? Who has a very contentious impact on the women's suffrage movement, I think is quite clever. So I have to give my props to Allesandra Clark for writing this script. If again, my colleagues have informed me, I strongly suspect this is a satire. It feels like a satire. If that is truly the case, Allesandra, you did a very solid job. If it's not, wow. But I do like certain comedies of a main fool as a protagonist. The Jerk is probably like the best one out there, but the Jerk is far more likable than Victoria Woodhull is in the script. With Victoria, you like seeing her on the page to see what sort of trouble she's going to get into, and then seeing the blowback of it. There is no real enviously good character or moral certainty character to follow in this, and that is done by design. And I think it's a good commentary as well to what happens when overly ambitious people attain some attention, and how they're able to hurt themselves and the very causes they claim to profess because their motivation isn't there for the cause itself. It's really just for themselves. And I think that's a nice little byproduct to this type of biopic satire. So for myself, I would give this a green light myself. For you guys out there, I've put out, listening live, I've put out the poll, so please feel free to vote on your decisions. While we do that, I'll check in over with the Patreon to see what they have decided to do with regards to this script. And for them, it is a pass. So some of the Patreons on there that voted, thank you so much for your votes and participations. They have voted to pass this script, which I completely understand. Again, as what Adega commented earlier, as what I pointed out, some of the satirical elements at the start are not clear enough. So and also given the amount of earnest content we have received over the last better part of the decade, it is kind of difficult to discern what is satire and what is just agenda-driven things. But regardless, that's quite all right. Let's check out now with the poll in just a few more moments. Give you guys time to chime in there. But yeah, this was this was Vicky by Allesandra Clark. I will say, aside from a number of spelling mistakes or missing of a few words here and there, the structure of the story for a biopic was quite solid. Broken up into chapters was very good to isolate certain parts of her life. The progress from scene to scene, each of the scenes kind of had a beginning, definitely had a beginning, middle, end. Also had some solid jokes in there as well. Characters were alarmingly distinct, especially the father and the mother, with their father's stealing and trying to sell his snake oil at every point he can. The mother speaking in tongues, kind of being a crazy, person who has suffered so much grief and trauma within her life and marriage and loss of some of her children that she has completely checked out. And of course, Tennessee's loyalty to her big sister and Victoria's crazy ambition, all very fun aspects to do. I like the fact that it doesn't try to sugarcoat any of the characters at this time, and it does expose some of their hypocrisy, but at the same time also showcases some of their efforts, their goals, and the reasons why they went for them. So yeah, I would suggest when it comes to a modern day satire, check this script out. Check out Vicky by Allesandra Clark. I think it'd be a decent learning process to see how to structure not just a biopic, but also see the strengths of the satire that she incorporated and also the weaknesses, so that if you are interested in doing a satire of your own, you have one of countless bases, things to base your premise on with regards to the execution, and hopefully, the mistakes that you can catch in Alessandra's work, or the positives that you can catch in her positives that you can find in her work in other works as well that are out there, will help give you a nice guiding set of guiding coordinates to achieve your own. With that being said, let's end the poll and see what the live audience has to say. And for the people out there, you guys agreed with Adega and myself, gave this 100% on the green light. So thank you so much for that. And finally, we are going to go over to the donations. So we have the Dead Man for $4.99 says, script. This is the last Saturday I can join you live due to a change in jobs and schedule. I've enjoyed your shows. Thanks for everything. Well, thank you so much for that, Dead Man. I really appreciate that. It's okay if you can't catch us live. If you want to able to catch us on the replay, that's great. And always feel free to leave a comment to the show. We would greatly appreciate that. He follows it up with a 99-cent poop emoji sticker, which also appreciate, with another $4.99 saying, if I can join you live at some point in the future, I will. Please enjoy this last poop emoji for now. Well, thank you so much for that, the Dead Man. Greatly appreciated, as always, but never obligated or required. But we always appreciate that. That does help with the show. And with that, guys, I want to thank you so much for spending the last 2 hours with us talking about Vicky. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. If you guys happen to be in the Toronto area, the Toronto International Film Festival is going on right now. You can catch some very interesting films that are out there. Not all of them being part of the big mainstream, but we have some really wonderful foreign films and some small independent films that are premiering out there. So if you happen to be in the neighborhood, see if you can grab a ticket and get yourself a chance to see something that is outside of the big, huge tentpole IP stuff. It's nice to alter your intake of media away from the big studio things, and film festivals like TIFF can be a good aspect to that. But outside of that, I wish you all a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. So never forget, guys, when it comes to great story, it all starts with the script.